So here's an interesting movie. We are talking about Hostile, directed and written by Matthew Turi. Now this is a romantic horror film, and I would actually best describe this as Pretty Woman meets 28 Days Later. Sound intriguing? I would say this before I kind of go into the plot synopsis. This is definitely worth a rent. I don't know if it's worth a buy because I do not feel it's got much replay value. However, I feel you would very much enjoy it on the one watch. So let me just tell you a little bit about the plot. It essentially focuses on a world that is in some kind of post-apocalyptic state. Now we kind of led to believe there's been some type of chemical attack which has ultimately turned some of the populace into weird zombie-like kind of mutants. And it focuses on this one particular woman, and she's essentially out on a run doing kind of searching for food, and ends up getting in a kind of a car accident and breaks her leg and has to kind of defend herself against these strange creatures that seem to be roaming the desert. There might be other threats as well. We also have a B storyline where we have a flashback that actually shows you this particular woman, Juliette's kind of like journey to where she was, and it has essentially this kind of very much a large chunk of this movie is in flashback, essentially kind of showing this kind of her journey from essentially a kind of junkie almost living off the street, but then she kind of meets this kind of like, you know, dream guy. He's kind of rich, good looking, kind of takes her in, kind of sorts her life out. And then that's kind of juxtaposed how she is in the kind of the present timeline and how she obviously has changed. So it's a very kind of unique feel to it. Now, a few things I want to say about this movie. This is a very low budget movie, but it does a great job of hiding its budget, because in the kind of the post-apocalyptic timeline, it's really just in the desert. There's not really much location, so it's all kind of in this one location of this upturned kind of Jeep. That we do see a few shots at the beginning of just kind of like, you know, run down gas station and all that sort of thing. But for the most part, there's not huge amounts of kind of location, and all the flashbacks are just in kind of contemporary America. So, you know, no need for kind of like much kind of like budget there, to be honest. So the budget is quite well hidden, but I've got to say the production value looks fairly high, because they haven't kind of had to kind of go too much in the way of sets and that sort of thing. I feel here the lighting, the camera work, and the kind of just the production feel seems very good, considering this is actually Matthew Turi's first feature-length debut as a director. And it's very impressive, because the guy has some talent here to make it seem, you know, like a well-produced movie, despite the fact that it's really very limited in locations, and obviously has a kind of a low budget, but it's able to kind of still give you a high production value as well. And that's also a testament to the actors here, because I feel they do a really good job of kind of selling you these kind of like these roles, particularly Brittany Ashworth, who is essentially the protagonist of this movie, because we have her in these two timelines, and they're very starkly different. So in the kind of the post-apocalyptic timeline, she's very sure of herself, and it's kind of like a Ripley or a kind of like Sarah Connor type. Whilst in the flashbacks, she's, you know, we see a kind of an arc through her as she kind of changes, and good acting. When we see the kind of the creatures and stuff, I feel that there's some really great special effects in here as well, and the creatures are both scary but somehow sort of sympathetic at the same time, which really makes them quite interesting. They're not quite zombies exactly, they're kind of mutants, so it's the best way I'll describe it. And you know, so it sounds very intriguing. So is there any negatives of this film? So let's just kind of address this. So this film, like I've said, has a lot of flashbacks, And if we talk about those first, the flashback sequences, I feel a lot of people will be maybe put off the amount of time that it spends in these flashbacks. Now, I feel there was a point of it, that the idea here, I think, is to show the differences of how this woman has grown. And also, this movie has kind of themes of fate and how kind of like things kind of loop back to you and stuff like that, which is kind of all kind of explored in the movie. But nonetheless, they spend a lot of time there. So I feel if people going into this wanting some kind of like zombie type movie may feel they're watching a kind of a typical kind of romantic movie, and those things really are. They really are a Disney kind of you know, romantic film, because that's exactly how they play. So if you are a fan of romantic movies and kind of maybe not romantic comedies exactly, but you know, it plays like that. So a good third of this movie is essentially a romantic film, and I feel it goes a little bit OTT. I mean, this girl, she's illiterate. She's literally, you know, hooked on drugs, scamming people, doing all sorts of weird stuff. But she meets this handsome, charming guy who's an owner of an art gallery. He's mega rich, and he takes kind of an interest in her for some inexplicable kind of reason, and really kind of goes out of his way to kind of pursue her, when you would think, you know, there's just no reason why he would. There doesn't seem to be enough reasons for him to pursue her, if that makes sense. I mean, she's attractive, but even so, this guy clearly wouldn't have a problem, let me just say. And she seems very kind of unwilling to, so you don't really understand why he's kind of necessarily so interested in her. So it's a little bit of a kind of a romantic wish fulfillment, like the typical things you'll see in like a Nicholas Sparks film and stuff like that. So I think maybe it went a little bit too far in having these two people on such kind of different kind of like sides of the track, so to speak. It made it just seem a little bit corny, those sequences, and unrealistic. And like I've said, although I feel it's well acted and well shot, I feel maybe it spends just a little bit too much time on those scenes as well. In regards to the kind of the post-apocalyptic scenes, is there any downside to that? I do feel we don't have enough information about the creatures. When you watch the movie as a whole, you know, you'll kind of think, I don't understand maybe why we don't know more about these kind of like these creatures and what they're actually striving for and how intelligent they are until you've kind of seen the whole movie. And I feel like we needed to make a little bit more information about how maybe any survivors would feel about these creatures, and you know, their experiences with them. It will make sense when you kind of see the whole film. But that's a minor point, to be honest with you. I actually think they did quite a good job of like making the creatures both scary, but also, like I've said, you know, seem kind of more like they're not evil exactly. There are some pretty gory scenes here, and I've got to say there's a great sense of tension. These kind of creatures are a little bit susceptible to light, so that's kind of like, you know, it's all kind of like what's hiding in the darkness, just, you know, a few feet ahead of us and stuff like that. So I do feel it's definitely enjoyable for a watch. I just don't think it's got massive replay value either, because once you've kind of seen the story, I don't know if there's enough to kind of make you go back. So although I feel this is a film people should definitely rent, I don't know if it's a film I would say they should purchase, because once you've seen it, I really don't think there's much to go back on. But it's very well made, it looks great, I think it's well acted. The kind of like the scary scenes are scary, the kind of the makeup of the creature is good. I maybe have some issues with some of the kind of the story and maybe the elements and how the kind of the pacing of it is just maybe a little bit wonky. But overall, it's a solid movie, and it's a weird kind of like a proper romantic comedy, well not comedy, a proper romantic film mixed with a proper survival horror film. So definitely, if you're a fan of Pretty Woman and 28 Days Later, Walking Dead, smoosh them up, and this is what you're left with. So I'll give this movie a 7 out of 10. It's worth a watch, and definitely I feel will have its fans, and I can't see too many people moaning about much else than what I've said. So I'll be really curious if anyone else has seen it, what their thoughts are about this film. Please leave a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.